What do you think is on it?
By the looks of everything, I'd say one goddamn fucked up horror picture.
Big Wig Gorilla Studios coming at you live from the trees of Texas. We're just in Texas today, me and Everest. We got Everest back here talking about some
Yeehaw! What's up?
hey, some good modern day horror movies. These may be my favorite modern day horror
Er,
movies. X and Pearl.
oh wow. Yeah, I mean that's high praise. These are two movies that I remember when they came out in 2022, especially in horror circles, they generated so much buzz. Like these are probably the horror movies and at least the new kind of franchise that I've heard the most about in the last 5 years or so probably. Like I just remember they were such a moment. Part of that too is because they star. I mean, Jenna Ortega's in X, and she's gone on to blow up and become a crazy star. Mia Goth is kind of an it girl in Hollywood too now. So these are definitely massive movies, especially for horror fans. I had never seen them before. We came up with the idea to do this episode as Maxine, the finale to the trilogy, is coming out in what, like 2 weeks, week and a half.
Yeah, it comes out July 5th, so like what, 10 days from now from when we're recording?
Dang. Yeah, from when we're recording. So Maxine's coming out. Braden hit me up and was like, "Hey, both X and Pearl are on streaming right now because he knew I'd never seen them. Would you want to do an episode on that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take an excuse to finally watch them because they had kind of slipped past my radar, and I was definitely glad to finally check them out, and they're interesting, man. I'll say that. I'm glad I got the chance to watch them, and you got to rewatch them for this episode. So we were talking. We've got two different experiences with these movies coming into today.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to rewatch them before Maxine, honestly, because I think it just gives a different POV going to Maxine. Because, like, it's like, yeah, I've seen these movies, but seeing them so recently, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have these in the back of my mind when I go into the theater to see Maxine. I didn't see either of these in the theater, which I kind of wish I had, honestly, because I'm a horror fan. I like good horror movies, and these are two good horror movies, in my opinion. And they're the same story, but they are quite different from one another.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think. I mean, even before we get into plot specific stuff too, I think just the production and sort of history surrounding these two movies is super interesting because they came out in theaters like what, months apart from another,
Yeah,
so they
I,
had to
w-
be.
I want to say that the trailer for Pearl didn't even drop until X was released. Like, I think when X was released, that's when they dropped the trailer for Pearl because they filmed these movies either side by side or back to back. I don't know which. It's kind of hard to tell, but when you watch the movies, you can tell they were filmed on the same set, the same lot, which is really cool in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's super cool, and it's not often you see something like this done. Like, even I remember back when they were coming out, and because I had friends who went and saw X in theaters, and then they were like, "Yeah, and the next one's coming out, or like the prequel or whatever is coming out really soon too." And I was like, "What? So did they film these? Like, yeah, either back to back or simultaneously. I don't know what they did, but you can tell watching them, especially when you watch them back to back. Like you said, they take place on the same set. They're sort of two sides to the same coin, the same story told in a different time period, in a slightly different way. Same actress, Mia Goth, is in both of these. And so I just thought, I texted you as I was watching these. I think it's really cool and interesting that a director like T. West, who wasn't necessarily a household horror name before these movies. He had done some work. He had one movie that I'm forgetting the name of. You know it. That was pretty big in horror circles. I think like
House
late
of the Devil.
2000s, early 2010s. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
House of the Devil.
2009, so late 2000s,
2009.
borderline early 2010s. Yeah, I think it made no money, but I think among horror circles, people know of House of the Devil. They know that movie title if they haven't seen it, and if they have seen it, they've seen it. I've seen it, and I will say I think X and Pearl are better movies. But it's been a
Okay.
minute since I've seen House of the Devil, so.
Yeah, but that's really his only big title. Even and I don't even know if I'd call that big. Horror fans know of it, but like you were saying, it
Yeah,
didn't make a ton of money.
it's kind of like a cult classic, if you will, like a cult
Exactly.
horror
Yeah.
classic.
Yeah, which is nothing to scoff at, but it was just crazy in my mind that, uh, A24 and basically all the producers and everything let T West come up with this trilogy and really bring it all to life in the span of just 2 years as we have Maxine coming out in, like we said, just about 10 days as we're recording this. So, usually something like this would take, the first movie would have to come out and be successful before you start greenlighting stuff. And it would take, maybe we'd be getting Maxine 3 more years from now. And so have this all come together like this, I think is really cool and was exciting for fans because you had like boom, X came out, and then if you like that, you had Pearl come out very soon after, and then you were looking forward to Maxine. Also, Maxine is you've talked about it. Maxine's such a great title with the three X's for the finale of this trilogy. I love it.
Yes, I think I've told you. I think I think I've told you specifically that I think Maxine with the three X's may be the most clever movie title in movie history because it is, if you want to call it that, it is the X trilogy. It all started with the movie X. So the third one being Maxine, main character of the movie X, having three X's in her name is so clever to me.
Yeah, it's a great title. It sort of reminiscent. I mean, wasn't a trilogy, but Black Klansman did a similar thing with the three Ks for the KKK in its title.
Yes,
Hopefully, we
yes.
can say that on YouTube. I don't, dude.
Another,
This episode's gonna be explicit, by the way.
oh,
if
very
if people
explicit.
are listening,
Very
yeah,
explicit. But yeah, Black Klansman is another clever title for me. Yeah, no, I love how X ends because I think it just encapsulates what these two movies avoid because they find the camera and they're like, "Oh, what's on it?" And the sheriff's, I assume he's the sheriff. We don't really get his title, but he's like,
I think he's the sheriff.
if you ask me, one fucked up horror picture. And then it cuts into the credits on X. I'm like, oh my god, that is so fucking perfect. What a perfect ending.
Yeah. I guess we're gonna dive into X first. I know we were debating before this. Should we go chronological order in universe and start with Pearl, or should we go release order with X and then Pearl? We're gonna start talking about X, and the ending's definitely a standout. I love how they kind of frame the movie with the police and with the sheriff because the film opens after the events have all happened with the police winding up on the farm and discovering pretty much everything. And then we get to go back 24 hours and see how it all happened. And then the police come back for the ending, which I think is a really cool way of kind of framing this story and starting it off.
Yeah, it's bookended pretty perfectly because it opens and you're like, okay, what exactly is the sheriff and his team seeing right now? And then once it ends, you kind of know what they saw because they went down to the basement, and you know what's down in the basement by the time this movie
Yep,
ends.
you find out in the movie. Yeah, which is really cool. Also, there's the tie-in where as they're heading to the location and they drive past the dead cow on the road, which super disgusting by the way. The sheriff and the police are there checking it out. So you kind of get to see them in the
So
middle of the setup for the movie
So
too.
before I rewatched this movie, I ate a burger, right? And then I saw that scene. I'm
Oh
like, oh
no.
my god, I don't want a burger anymore. I don't want a burger. I feel so sorry for that cow.
Oh my dude, that was disgusting. And there's a couple things in X that I think are pretty gross. Mainly one thing we'll get to later. Maybe we don't even want to bring it up, but that shot of the cow was I felt for Maxine when she was puking and almost trying to throw up in the car. Nasty.
I was like, that would be me too. Like if I was in that car and I saw that cow, like just gut
Oh
spilled
yeah,
out.
I am gagging.
It's not just like roadkill. It's like legit this cow was like dissected. I'm like, oh my god, yeah, I would throw up too. Like if I saw that visual of a graphic, just a cow dead on the road, not only, but his gut spilled out. I'm like, yeah,
Lacerated,
no.
yeah, guts are spilled out. Disgusting. But it kind of sets the tone for this movie, and that's another thing that you mentioned to me is one of your favorite things about this, and something I noticed, and I think it carries over to Pearl too. Just the atmosphere in both these movies, but mainly X because it's kind of our first taste and look at like the farm and the land in Texas and kind of how they stage everything. It works so well. I love the atmosphere. I think the production design is great. And horror's always been, I think, the genre, maybe aside from like period piece stuff specifically, where the production design and the locations you're in matter the most because they're helping to set up the atmosphere and how eerie something is or how scary something's going to be. And I think this movie excels there.
Yeah, definitely. I love, 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 love the atmosphere of this movie. And just the entire setup of the film, too. Like, they are kind of on this road trip. They're like, yeah, we're going to this farm. We're gonna film our porno here. And, like, the
Hmm.
first 30 minutes is just that. It's just setup. And, like, the horror aspect of the film doesn't really start until about an hour in, 50 minutes to an hour in,
Yeah.
where, Pearl obviously is Pearl, as you see from the movie Pearl, which we'll talk about later. But I love how much these two movies line up together, and you can just tell they were filmed so close to each other, if not at the same time.
Yeah, and not only that, from kind of the like a singular vision, it's not like this was one movie happened and then a different director or writer tried to pick it up and do something else. This was like one guy with help, it was the same vision and it comes together so nice. But yeah, that's another thing I was going to point out about these two movies in regards to just horror films in general. They are pretty slow. Not to say that it's a bad thing at all, especially in X. I was invested in the setup. I really liked it. The idea of looking at this sort of early age porn industry, this group trying to film a porno, really was intriguing to me. I'm a big fan of the movie Boogie Nights, which is also centered around the 1970s porn industry, and so kind of drawing some parallels there. But both of these movies take a long time for actual horror stuff to start happening, for kills to start happening. And so it's impressive that they're still looked at as fondly as they are without a lot of action, I guess you could say, in the first half of the movies.
I feel like they kind of made the kills feel more impactful though, because you got to spend time with each and every one of these characters before they died.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point because this movie is sort of set up. Nothing super bad happened for most of the entire first hour, and it is just you watching them try to film their movie and developing relationships with the different characters. And then in the second half, it turns into a Texas Chainsaw Massacre esque slasher with Pearl one by one just killing pretty much everyone. And her husband Howard gets in on some of the fun too.
Yeah, I forgot. I think I texted you this, but I forgot how fucked up Howard was too, because I thought he was kind of innocent in all this. But yeah,
Yeah,
he starts
yeah,
murdering some people, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot that aspect of the film. I thought Pearl was the one that just murdered everyone.
yeah. Uh, Howard's crazy. Pearl is crazy. They also do a really good job of just making them incredibly creepy throughout the setup in the first half of the movie. Like nothing they do is really super bad until the second half and the rampage and the murder start. But the atmospheric build and the tension created by just these super strange, super old people, like just the makeup and the hairstyling and the effects with Mia Goth to create the older Pearl is pretty unbelievable.
I can't believe that's Mia Goth, and I will say before we deep dive into Pearl later on, Mia Goth, her character in these movies, he likes her secrets.
She does, yeah.
Well, I guess it's Pearl specifically that likes her secrets because when her and Maxine are, it's always weird to me when in a movie you see an actor slash an actress just interacting with themselves. So like
Hmm.
the first initial scene with Pearl and Maxine is so odd to me because like obviously as Pearl, Mia Goth looks nothing like herself, but as Maxine, she just looks like herself. So it's just really odd seeing them interact and having that. What were they drinking? Milk?
Lemonade. They drink lemonade.
Lemonade. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And like how later on Howard sees like the two glasses and he's like, "Oh no, someone's interacted with my
Hmm.
wife. This is not gonna be good."
Yeah. A lot of foreshadowing and like creepy stuff going on with Pearl in the first half of this movie. Because as we said, most of it is pretty chill. Like it's building tension. You know it's gonna go bad, but it really is an explosion toward the second and third act. I would even call this almost just a two-act movie. In a weird way. I mean, it probably does have three acts if you break it down, but most of it is the setup, starting to film the project, building the characters, and then the downfall of Pearl gets ticked off and just goes on a rampage, and her and Howard try to kill everybody.
Yeah, that's honestly fair because like the first 50 minutes or so of this movie is just yeah, like you said, entirely kind of set up for what's about to come, and then the last half of the movie is just the horror film you were in for once you saw this movie because obviously anyone going
Yeah.
into this movie knew it was a horror, knew something was about to go down. But I kind of appreciate them taking all that time to develop all these characters because they feel more important before they die.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I thought, most of the characters felt real, and I felt like I was, kind of there with them, honestly. Like their connection in the house filming the movie was great, and for the most part I enjoy all the characters. RJ, who's like this super kind of prestigious young director guy who thinks he's making like auteur cinema with the porno. He's kind of annoying, and I'm glad that he eventually ends up being the first one to die. But everyone else, they're not all great people, but the way this movie writes them and has them interact, I grew to pretty much appreciate all of them.
I agree with that, and just as film fans in general, as me and you and I are, RJ being like, I'm not filming this as a porno, but as cinema. It kind of like opens another lens for the audience to look at it as like this isn't just a horror movie; it is truly cinema. Like this is just a movie.
Right. And that's a good point because horror for a long time has struggled to find its audience and its praisers outside of just like horror fans who are there for the scares and the blood and the gore or whatever it is. And that's kind of what we've been seeing from a lot of the prestigious horror movies to come out in the past 10, 20 years, that sort of genre of elevated horror, Jordan Peele and Babadook and all these different movies trying to kind of signal to people like horror films are just cinema and are real movies too, and to sort of parallel it with the porn industry, which probably has that problem on an even greater level, and RJ's character kind of personifies that. I think is cool, even though he does end up being pretty annoying.
Now I gotta admit, I do love the callback of the prude because RJ is like
Oh yes,
to Jenna Ortega. She's like, "What are you, a prude?" And she's like, "No, no, I'm open to this." And then later on, Jenna Ortega's like, "I want to be in the
she
film."
is open to it.
Her character's
She
name
wants to
is
do it.
Lorraine. Okay, I know her character's name,
Lorraine
but I'm going to call her
works
Jenna
counts.
Ortega just because I love Jenna Ortega so fucking much.
She's great.
She may be my favorite actress working today, if I'm being honest. She is so incredible in everything she does. But later on, when she's like, I want to be in the film, and RJ's just like, what? No.
No.
And she's like, what are you? A prude? And he's just kind of taken aback by that, like, whoa, you're using my own words against me? What are you? And I'm like, well, she's smart, that's what she is.
Yeah, she is smart, and I love that that's kind of what kicks off the whole rampage because RJ, he's sobbing in the shower. He decides he's done with everything. He goes to leave, and that's where Pearl claims her first victim. And I also love that I didn't fully understand, like Pearl and her motives and like her and Howard in this movie, which is why I think Pearl is so great because we see the backstory, but you still get enough in this movie to know that she's frustrated with being old, with where she is in her life. she still wants things, and to see all these people who are young and can do things and be their own people and try to make it upsets her, and so she kills them all. It's subtle and you don't get too much. Like, you definitely get more of the backstory in Pearl, but it works for this. And again, I would consider X more of a traditional slasher film, especially once you get towards the second half. Still with some great storytelling and other stuff too, but Pearl sort of feels more like, we'll get into it later, but a Carrie or like a sort of different type of horror movie, even though these two are similar stories and are in clearly in the same universe, same set, whatever. They manage to feel like different styles of the genre, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, Pearl in this movie, definitely from the movie Pearl, you definitely get more out of it. You understand her perspective more because earlier on when she was talking to Maxine, she's like, "We're the same," but life doesn't always turn out like you want it to. You understand that more so once you see Pearl.
Yeah,
But yeah, in terms of just everything that took down in the movie X, RJ being the first to go was pretty satisfying, to be honest, because he was
it
pretty
is
selfish. He
satisfying.
was so
Yeah.
selfish.
He was. He wanted to have the glory, and he was talking about with everyone else when their partners were in the movie or whatever. He was like, it's just making a movie. It's not real." And then as soon as his girlfriend wants to do it, he's like, "No, you can't." Like, come on, dude, grow up. Yeah, I was definitely happy that RJ went, but with all the other characters, maybe not so. What's her name? Bobby Lynn, I think, is the blonde
Yeah.
the blonde woman. She could be a little bit annoying at times and felt a little bit like stuck up, but she still had interesting elements to her that when Pearl kicks her off the dock and pretty much feeds her to the alligator, which is a surprisingly big part of both these movies, is the alligator that lives in the pond or in the swamp behind the house. At first, I was expecting it just to be like a one-off with Maxine swimming there and the alligator starts creeping up behind her, which, by the way, great shot. Like the huge overhead with the alligator slowly swimming closer. I was like, that's awesome.
I
Um,
was just I was
but
just thinking during that scene, I was like, man, Maxine is so lucky because she didn't even realize that alligator was in the water. She got up just in time.
yeah, got up just in time. Alligator couldn't get her. That's kind of the big like tension builder, potentially scary moment, at least for me, in that first half of the movie, because you don't get a lot, but they still find moments to make you feel tense or unsettled. And the alligator face getting out of the water where Maxine doesn't even know. Definitely a good scene, but that alligator gets a lot more to do in later in this movie and especially in Pearl too, which I think is kind of cool.
Bobby Lynn, that's a character I think we kind we have different views
Oh
on
yeah.
because you were like, she's mostly okay, and I was like, man, I don't know.
You don't like her?
I don't love her. She felt very like self-involved. Like she felt very accomplished in what she had done. And I don't love
Mm.
that about characters in movies. Like I guess I like non-selfish characters in movies. Like I get if you're basking in the glory from time to time, but if that's your entire arc, I feel like you need more because it's like if you only care about yourself, you got problems.
Right. Yeah. I That's when I said like towards the when we started talking about the characters. I don't really think any of the characters in this are perfect people and they all have their flaws. But Bobby Lynn to me felt like she was kind of fun despite her flaws. Like, I agree with you. She's not a great person, but she didn't like actively annoy me or piss me off like RJ did. But I understand where you're coming from. She definitely feels very self-involved and was one of the characters I didn't care as much when she gets off. Like, dude, Wayne, I really like Wayne in this movie, who's
I really liked
Maxine's
Wayne too, which is kind of
boyfriend.
surprising
Yeah,
because he was like the head of it all. He was like the reason they were filming this porno at the barn, right? He's the
yeah,
reason they were filming the
hmm
porno at the property. He's the reason that all these people are getting paid. But he never like actively pissed me off or upset me. Like, he was legitimately kind of a somewhat good character. Like, I felt bad for Maxine that she lost him.
Yeah, me too. And oh my god, his death too was crazy. Maybe my favorite kill in the movie is the pitchfork through the holes in the shed to the eye. It's a crazy kill. And I was like, "Oh, don't go over there. Don't look through there. I know something bad's going to happen." And then he gets spiked through the eyeball. Disgusting. I would not want to be him.
Yeah, it's kind of upsetting. Like, his and Jenna Ortega's death later on were my most upsetting kills of the movie. I'm like, why? Why? Why did they have to
Dude,
die?
and Jenna Ortega goes through so much in this movie for not even being that much of a major character. She has to deal with Howard in the house, which is already creepy. He locks her in the basement, stabs at her, like cuts at her hands and her fingers when she's trying to get out, and then she finally is freed by Maxine and just gets shotgun to the head trying to run out of the house. Like, oh my god, poor girl.
Yeah. I mean, you are obviously much younger than me, but I texted you like during my rewatch of X. I was like, man, I feel so uncomfortable watching this scene of Jenna Ortega like throwing on to Kid Cudi as an 18-year-old because I'm like, obviously that's how old she was while filming this movie because this movie released when she was released in 2022. She's 21 right now, so it released while she was 19. So during filming, she was probably 18. And I was like, I feel so uncomfortable watching an 18/19-year-old do this scene. Like, even though you don't get full exposure of her, you get enough
Yeah,
exposure that it's like if you're old enough, it kind of feels uncomfortable.
yeah, I understand that. I mean, I'm younger than you, but I get that. But like you said, they keep her covered up enough, and I mean, the other two that are like in the movie, you see pretty much everything. So at least they didn't expose Jenna too much, but it's definitely weird. Especially now seeing her in like stuff like Scream and everything else he's gone on to do Wednesday, whatever. Yeah, I feel that, but
Yeah, the
yeah, she
interesting
goes
thing
through it,
is
man.
though that this was released the same year as Scream 5.
Yeah,
I, I want to say they were released the same month actually. They were released back to back. Scream 5 and X. Engine Ortega is he's great in both. Like if I'm being honest, like I haven't seen Jenna
she is
Ortega in
good.
anything
Yeah,
she's bad in. She is just a great actress.
yeah, me either. She is great. The one thing that I was kind of surprised by, I don't know if it was out of character or out of place. I think it was in character, but I just didn't love is when Maxine comes back into the house towards the end and like finds Lorraine, and then Lorraine has this like huge outburst at her and says like everything's her fault, and she like hates her for having them come here, and it's like Maxine didn't really do anything, dude. Like that kind of annoyed me in this movie
Yeah,
because
she was
it
like,
felt like it came out of nowhere.
He was like, I hate you. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa. Okay, okay. I can understand it from a certain point of view, but like when you really look back at it, Wayne is the reason you are here. And he is dead. Don't be
he's
pinning
dead.
this all on Maxine.
I know Wayne's the reason, and it's still he had no idea that the place was going to be owned by like friggin' homicidal maniacs. Like I don't know, that part felt a little bit silly to me towards the end, but Jenna Ortega acts it well. Like you said, she's just a great actress. But that was the one part that felt a little bit out of place towards the end here. Also, I'm not gonna lie, this is a very serious and scary movie at times. But dude, I laughed when the kickback from the shotgun just sends Pearl flying at the end and ultimately leads to her downfall. I thought that
Oh
was
my
so
lord,
funny.
I rewinded that scene because I thought it was so hilarious. I was like, wait. So this murderer whole entire movie. Both the murderers. Like, Howard has a heart attack, and then Pearl, she goes to shoot Maxine, and she misses the shot, but she, like, goes flying back off the fucking porch.
Breaks her
And,
hip. Like, oh my
um,
god.
when Maxine's walking out, and she's like, "Ah, my hip," and Maxine's, I was rooting for her to back over her. And that's
Oh yeah, I'm
exactly
glad
what
she
she
did because I was like,
does.
maybe, yeah, maybe she'll just leave her there, and then the cops will find her or whatever. But no, she ends Pearl.
Oh my god, the back reverse scene over the head is so incredible. That may be my favorite decapitation scene in all of cinema.
Yeah, it's definitely satisfying. But yeah, it's so ridiculous how like Pearl and Howard are both these like super formidable forces in this movie. And Pearl's killing everybody. Howard shoots I forget his name, the Marine vet's name in the movie, the
Jackson,
character
I believe
name.
it was.
Jackson. Yeah. Jackson gets shot by Howard while helping to find, quote unquote find Pearl.
Yeah, because
Um
they were both in the military, and Howard's like, "Oh, once a Marine, always a Marine," and then he just shoots him. I'm like, "Fuck, I
yeah.
forgot. I forgot Howard was as insane as fucking Pearl was."
Yeah, they're both crazy, but in the end, Howard dies of a heart attack, which I think it's interesting that the whole time he's talking because Pearl like wants him to do stuff with her throughout the course of the movie, and he's like, I can't, my heart. And finally, they end up doing stuff, which is a scene I was talking about, which is like if I rewatch this movie in the future, dude, I might just be like walking out or skipping that scene because that was so uncomfortable watching two 80-year-olds just go at it.
Yeah,
Um,
that was very uncomfortable, and I'm wondering just why. Like, how can your heart take like having sex with this woman, but it can't take murdering this ex-marine? Like, how can you murder this Kid Cudi, this man, but it can't take having sex with her? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I figure murdering someone would
yeah,
take more out of your heart than having sex with someone.
me too. But what's interesting is he does survive through having sex with Pearl, only to end up having the heart attack in the climax. After I forget exactly what sets it off, something like startles him, and then he has the
Well,
heart attack.
he shoots Jenna Ortega's character, and then he's like, I, I guess he's having stress from that, and he has a heart attack.
I
And
don't know.
Mia Goth, it's Mia Goth versus Mia Goth, and younger Mia Goth,
Yeah,
Maxine, shoots Pearl, and that's well, no, she doesn't even shoot Pearl. Pearl shoots at
she
her, and
doesn't.
she misses, and
She
it
goes
backfires, and she goes
flying.
flying like 20 feet. And she's like, "Oh,
It's
my
ridiculous.
hip, my hip, oh, my hip." And then Maxine backs over her skull and it crushes. And this is one of those moments in movies that makes me wonder what would actually happen if you backed over someone's skull. Like,
Oh
I
god.
feel like it would crush it, obviously, but like I don't feel like it would be as gruesome as it was shown in this scene.
Yeah. Me either. It's pretty gruesome, but hey, that's a horror movie. I also love as Howard's like having the heart attack and dying, and that's when Maxine takes the opportunity and pulls the gun on Pearl and is trying to get the keys, and Pearl's like, who's just killed like everyone there with Maxine. She's like, he's having a heart attack. Don't you understand? And Maxine's like, I don't give a fuck, woman. Like, you just murdered a bunch of people.
Yeah, you completely get Maxine's perspective from this. You're like, yeah, I don't give a fuck either. I just want to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Which she ends up doing after backing over Pearl, and then we get the completion of the sort of the bookend with the police coming back and the great line about, one fucked up horror movie.
And he's like, "Oh, I found the camera. What do you think is on this?" And the sheriff's just like, "If you ask me, from what we've seen today, one fucked up horror picture." I'm like, "Oh my god, that's such a perfect ending."
It is. It's a perfect ending line. The credits roll after, and it really leaves you feeling like you watched a complete horror film. Now, I will say, like, I'm not absolutely in love with this movie. I do think it's a little bit slow, and there's certain things that I don't know, just aren't my favorite. But overall, especially in terms of recent horror films, definitely one of the better ones. I had a really good time watching it, and I'm really glad I finally got to because, like I said, I missed both these movies in theaters, so it was cool. I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Like, it's not the perfect horror movie, but it is like a horror movie that gives you enough to care about.
Yeah, I agree with that, and yeah, it's good, but we're not done because we still got a whole nother movie to talk about.
Exactly. All right, going into Pearl, Everest. What did you think?
Yeah. So Pearl was also very good. I mean, I know you mentioned this might be, if Maxine is good, one of the best, maybe the best horror trilogy of all time. Now, part of that's just because there aren't that many horror trilogies. A lot of the big franchises have a ton of movies, but I think Pearl is a great second movie, or chronologically first movie. It's a prequel to X, which I think is interesting to have the prequel come out just months after X, the sort of original film. And I think a lot of Pearl's best elements are its prequel elements, getting to see where the character you see in X came from. The origin story of its slasher villain is pretty cool and something you don't see a lot of times in horror. And although I would say Pearl is an even slower movie than X and doesn't have as interesting of a plot in it, what it does have is some really good character moments. Like we were saying, you get to see Pearl for who she is and why she became so evil. And also, Mia Goth is just incredible in this film. One of the best horror performances I've ever seen. I think she's magnificent. I could not take my eyes off her at moments in this movie. So, although I don't think Pearl's a perfect horror movie, it's another good one, and I was happy I got to watch it for the first time just a couple hours before recording this, so I'm pretty fresh on it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Pearl is kind of the perfect villain horror origin story.
Yeah.
Like, you get why she is what she is. And that's
Hmm.
not something you get that often. Like, you get villain origins, you get just horror origins every now and then, but this is the villain origin. Like, you get why she is what she is.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
you understand why she is what she is. You understand why she snapped. You understand her psyche, and I like the glimpses into her psyche throughout this film.
Yeah, I do too. And although you went about what you were trying to say it got a little bit convoluted there. I agree with you, and I see what you're saying. It's almost like if the iconic horror movie Carrie was a prequel to another movie where an older Carrie was like terrorizing a different main character. Because I do think Pearl and Carrie kind of have some similarities of this very slow build up to a young woman or a young girl snapping and seeing what causes her to do evil things at the end. The only difference is we already got to see the older version of this character, and now we're learning who she is and how she started out. And for the most part, I think it works. Like I did say, this movie does feel slow to me. Not uninteresting or unengaging, but a lot of first half, pretty much the entire first half, is just Pearl on the farm, same farm from X, which, as we talked about, is cool that they filmed it on the same set or same like location. But it's just her struggling with her family and with her mom, who is super strict and kind of a bitch, and her dad, who's infirmed and sick and can't really do anything, and how she feels held back. And so I don't think, to me, it's as interesting of a story as the shoot of a porno film is, and everything that went into that. There's also just more characters in X than there is in this movie. Like, what Pearl has, obviously Pearl, her mom, the projectionist, who's played by our new Superman, which is really cool. We can talk a little bit about that. David Cornsweet. He's good in this movie. And then her friend, Pearl's friend Mitzi, I think is her name. I don't remember exactly, but not a lot of characters. So a lot of it is just Pearl's psyche, seeing how she becomes who she is, and then the kills and the carnage that do end up happening again in the second half here.
Yeah, David Cornsweet, our Superman, he wasn't a good guy in this movie. He was just smuggling porn. He's like, yo, Mia Goth, Pearl, what's going on? You want to be in these films? You want to be in these films? And she's like, oh, let me watch one of your films. And she's like, oh, oh, that's what's going on. And I'm like, yep, yep, yep. And David Cornsweet's main mistake was going back to Pearl's
Yeah,
property.
yeah, should not have done that.
Poor guy. He's like,
Yeah.
Pearl,
Well,
you are scaring me. I'm gonna leave. And she's like, oh, no, you're not. No, you're not gonna leave.
no, you're not. You are not gonna leave. Um, and I was about to say, like, he's kind of the first victim in this movie, but she's already set her mom on fire, and her mom is like basically dying slowly in the basement, which is what David Cornsweet hears, which kind of sets everything in motion, and then goes out to the barn. Stuff just kind of derails from there, and then he ends up dying while he's in his car about to get away. He almost made it out. He was
He
almost safe.
almost made it out.
Yeah. I guess one thing that I could say, this kind of goes back to this being a really successful prequel or like origin story. I love how Pearl uses the pitchfork as a weapon in this movie, because we see her use it in X, and it's cool to see, like, even at the very start of this movie where we're kind of seeing Pearl isn't exactly, even from the start, all there, where she just like kills the goose to feed to the alligator using the pitchfork. And so I think it's a nice like reference or callback to X, how she kills Wayne with the pitchfork as well.
Yeah, indeed. Um, and next, yeah, she kills Dave Cornsweet, our Superman, with the pitchfork, but she also.
Mm-hmm.
So, do we want to talk about how she kills her mother? Her mother was an absolute bitch in this movie, so I can't even
Yeah, dude,
I
fuck
can't
her
even
mom.
blame her for
Like,
how she killed her
yeah,
mother.
no,
He
me either.
throws a pot of boiling water onto her and it burns her alive. And I'm like, yep, yep, her mother kinda deserved that, but I feel bad for her father.
Yeah, her father is a pretty tragic character in this movie because he doesn't really get to do anything. I find it hilarious that earlier on in the movie, as Pearl's realizing that her family's holding her back and she needs to kind of detach herself from them to go be a star, she sets off with the plan to kill her dad, to like be rid of her dad. And her plan is to wheel him down to the swamp and just chuck him in the pond to the alligator. I think it's so funny. Like, not. I mean, I guess it's a good way to dispose of the bodies, but it's a pretty extreme way of killing someone, to dump them into the alligator pond.
Yeah, legitimately, I don't really know what you're thinking.
It's just. I was just like, damn, bro's gonna get fed to the alligator. Like, just shoot him in the head. I don't know. Like, it feels so extreme. But I guess if you got it down there, why not? She's already feeding geese and stuff to the alligator. So bro was eating good in these movies. That's all I'll say.
Very good, because, I don't know. Like, once you're planning on furthering your life or your perspective in life, how are you planning on feathering this part of your life?
Yeah, but overall, I mean, I like, most of the kills in this movie. I think it works as a horror film again. I don't know if I necessarily agree with you that Pearl's a scarier movie, or a more terrifying movie than X. I think they're different. X does rely a little bit more on like jump scare type stuff and more traditional like horror tension building, whereas I feel like Pearl, a lot of the scary stuff comes from um the looks into her psyche, which this movie's edited pretty well. I think there's a lot of moments where um there'll be simultaneously something going on in Pearl's head, and then you'll see that like she'll be crushing the an alligator egg that she picks up, and then in her vision she'll see Howard coming home from war just get blown up. So that's a really interesting way to kind of look at her psyche, but probably the scariest thing for me in this movie is just the epic monologue at the end delivered from Mia Goth to her friend before she kills her as kind of the last big thing in the movie, because she's just so like monotone, creepy, talking about how she killed everyone, how everything bad in her life. It's a awesome monologue, and Mia Goth is, as we said, terrific in this movie.
Yeah, that is a terrifying monologue, and I think that just like displays everything that happened in these movies. And beforehand, I don't know, I think it was already a terrifying like set of movies because Maxine slash Pearl, they are both kind of tragic characters. Pearl more so than Maxine, but I mean, I guess that's yet to see with Maxine the movie, but Mia Goth is incredible in both of these films, and she kind of makes both of these films.
Yeah, I agree with that. One other thing I just thought about in relation to David Cornsweet's character, who he's a projectionist at the movie theater. That's how he gets to show Pearl the old like porno movie that he smuggled. I thought that was a clever way to tie in themes from X to Pearl. Is to still show that like Pearl knows what porn is, and I think like even David Superman, who I don't remember the character's name, man. I'm gonna be honest. He's like, this is gonna be huge once people figure out how to like distribute it and sell it, and then we see in X, it is blowing up, and they are sort of finding the technology to revolutionize that industry. So it's a cool way to connect the two movies besides just having Pearl in both.
Yeah, exactly, because David Cornslet was just ahead of his time distributing that kind of
He was, bro.
entertainment.
He's like, "Imma hold on to it." Yeah. He's like, "Imma hold on to it until it'll go big." I'm like, "Bro was probably holding on." Well, bro died, but if he wouldn't have died, he would have been holding on to it for a while.
Yeah, exactly, because Maxine's and their whole crew's type of motive was to distribute this type of entertainment, and Maxine was involved in that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, as you know, I don't have that much more to say on Pearl. I think once you see X and you kind of understand X, Pearl just kind of comes naturally. Like it is the origin story for the villain of X, and I think it works in that regard. It can be a little bit boring at times in the first half, I would say, at least for me. I don't get as interested in like Pearl wanting to be a dancer and all of that. And that's kind of the big, she goes to the audition, she doesn't get it. That's her moment that really, sets her off. And then she kills her friend towards the end. Also, it's crazy how she like sets her family, like her parents, back up at the dinner table with a pig that's got all the been eaten through by the maggots. Oh my god, disgusting.
Yeah, I'd agree that it's like it's not that's realistic, I guess, but it's it is kind of as realistic in the sense that like yeah, someone like this can just snap at a you know any sense of the moment. Like if they have this bad of a life, they can turn into this.
Yeah, and that's what Pearl sets out to show, and I think it does its job as a prequel. I think I gave both these movies 3.5 stars. I probably like X just a little bit more. I just feel like there's a little bit more going on, but Pearl succeeds at what it's going for, and it kind of served as a real moment for Mia Goth. I think people who watched this movie saw what an incredible actress she is, and now she's going to get a lot more work going into the future here. So I'm excited to continue to see her in more stuff, and including Maxine, which, like we said, is coming out soon. And I'm excited for that now. It feels good to have. Anytime I get caught up on like a franchise or something else before a new installment's coming out, it's a fun journey to go on. So I'm happy that I did that for these movies.
I'd agree with that. I'm excited for Maxine, and I think like anything with Mia Goth going forward, whether it's horror or not, is going to be incredible because she showed up in both Pearl and X, and he is the standout performance in both.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even going from the super aged up like technology, whatever they did in X to make her look like that is crazy, and then to get to see her just kind of as herself in Pearl, but in a more fleshed out role with more time, I think is great. And then we're gonna get that with Maxine too in the next movie. So I think it's going to be really good. I like these movies a lot. Anything else you have to say about Pearl or any of these really?
I think Pearl was the more horrifying movies of them both between X and Pearl because you really got to look into her psyche and you kind of, in a fucked up way, understood like why she snapped. Like you understood why Pearl is who she is. And X is great in the sense of it's just a great horror movie because it is. But Pearl Pearl is kind of it might be the best modern horror movie I've seen in recent years because you understand why the villain is who she is.
Yeah, which is really great. It's up there for me. I mean, both of these movies. I was a huge fan of Talk to Me when that came out just last year. I thought that was a great horror movie. We've gotten some good horror movies throughout the past couple years, but to get a set of movies like these that seem to be consistently unique and just really good is great. And yeah, hopefully Maxine's good. The trailer from what I saw, which I just watched today, because obviously I had no context previously. It looks pretty good. I'm excited for it.
I am very excited for Maxine. It's one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I think it's a top five from everything I remember. I think number five was Maxine, number four was Sonic 3, number three was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which has already obviously released. And then number two was Deadpool and Wolverine, and number one was Beetlejuice. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm so excited for Maxine. Like I cannot wait for this film, and I'm sure it's gonna have plenty of commentary over just the horror genre in general, and it deals with a real world serial killer, which is the Night Stalker. But timeline wise, it adds up perfectly to X and Pearl, which are two of the best modern horror movies and modern day age, if you ask me.
yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Doing Night Stalker will be interesting because I think both X and Pearl feel very isolated in terms of their story. Like they both take place just on the farm. That's really the only location for it all, like small towns in Texas. And so to bring Maxine into this like big light, I think, where I'm assuming they're going to be in LA, they're going to be in California, and to bring the Night Stalker element into it. I'll be curious to see how that feels in relation to these first two movies, but I think it makes sense that for the third one, for the final one, you kind of go bigger scale wise. So I'm excited.
Yeah, indeed. I'm very excited too. And like just in when you look at the history of things, X was set in 1979, so timeline wise it just lines up perfectly.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think that's about it for me, dude. These movies are great. Glad I finally got a chance to see them. As I continue to slowly become more and more of a horror fan, I feel like each year that goes by and I see new movies, I get more into the genre because I was someone who never really watched many like growing up until just a couple years ago, like 2020, I started getting into them. So excited for Maxine. Glad to have seen these movies, and yeah, it was a fun episode.
Very fun episode, and I think I've been a horror fan for a few years, but I think in terms of modern day horror, this is like the most exciting trilogy slash franchise in recent years. Like, of course, we had the continuation of the Scream franchise, but other than that, this is it, the X Trilogy.
Hmm. Yeah,
So yeah, like anyone that's a horror fan out there, let us know what you think about X and Pearl, and are you anticipating Maxine like we are? Thank you for watching, and you can find this podcast anywhere on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcasts, at the Red Arrow on YouTube. So yeah, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
yes, sir. And we're gonna go back into hibernation now.
Indeed. Gateway Grill Studios. We're going back to hibernation. We'll be back next time with who knows what.
Who knows? It's always a question.